I shook her down. Heave away, haul away. I shook her all.
My name's Yvonne Laval, and today is the 17th of August 2023, and here we are about to hear about the history of Cullercoats from Catherine Bamford. Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
You were just saying to me before that you didn't spend a lot of time in Cullercoats when you were young. We've got a lot of history, a lot of knowledge of the history of Cullercoats from your mum.
Yeah,
what was
that's
your
right.
mum's name?
My mum was Mona Smith.
Right, okay.
And she was a relation to the Taylors.
All right.
So she was born in 1921. She was actually born in Brown's Buildings. She was born in 1921, and she was born, I think, in number 4. She had 7 siblings, and as far as I know, they were all born there. There was a lot of Taylors lived in Brown's Buildings. My great-grandfather lived in number 9, I think. Anyway, that's where she was born. The family then moved to Granary Yard, number 1 Granary Yard. Both of them were knocked down many years ago because Brown's Buildings was really very poverty-stricken, very, very small. And all of them lived in there, you know, probably 2 rooms these houses had. So they were demolished, which was a shame, but it was a good thing because they couldn't live there. And then from there, my mother moved to Front Street, number 12 Front Street, and she sort of grew up there with all the siblings. My nana, Anne Taylor, she was a fishwife, related to Francis Taylor and to Joe Robinson. So Anne Smith was a fisherwoman, gutted the fish, took the fish up to Cramlington, sold to the local ladies or gents up there, and she did that more or less on a daily basis, I think.
Every day?
Yeah. Very hard working, as everybody was in Cullercoats, but a very tight, fantastic community. My mother went to John Street School, and I know little stories that she told me that they would always have big bloomers, but the bloomers always had to have a little pocket in them to keep the hanky in. That was very important. But her and her actually, it was her niece, because there was 20 years between my mother's eldest sister and my mother, and they both had, my nana and my auntie both had the children at the same time, girl each. So they were brought up really as sisters. But my mother was her auntie. So this is my mum on the left-hand side, and that's I used to call her Auntie Betty. That's my mother's niece with the hat on. You can see they're on Jakey's Beach. Spent hours down there. My mother used to say they would go down there and they would make little fires and they would cook limpets. And they would eat the cooked limpets.
The kids do things like that.
They did, and they were out literally all day.
Yeah.
You know, the family knew that they were all right because they knew where they were, but they were off hard work, and then none of my other aunties or uncles went into fishing other than one, who was actually a salmon fisher, but he got killed. There was a large boat coming out of the town. I can't quite remember the name of it. And it split the boat in 2, and he was killed. But he was the only one that had been fishing at that time. No, Jakey's Bank. So you went down Back Row, you went down Jakey's Bank, and then you got onto Jakey's. So possibly someone that had lived there, but I really don't know. This is another one of my mum. Again, she's on the left, the way you're probably looking at it. And this is outside one of the cottages across the road, because my mother's auntie Kitty, she lived across there. She lived in the cottages across the road. So that's them both there with their fancy little dresses on and the hats. That's another one of Jakey's Bank, just an old one of the family. Again, it was Jakey's Beach was the end place to go, I believe. So yes, a lot of time spent down there.
So you said your grandmother or your nana went to Cramlington to sell fish.
Yeah.
How did you get there? Any idea?
I don't really know.
No.
I mean, my mother used to say she walked, But then since then I have read that a lot of fishermen would get a lift on a cart.
Right.
What sort of cart that would be, I don't know. But my mother used to always insist that my nana walked there every time. So, and I think they just thought nothing of it.
No.
You know, possibly going through Seaton Delaval, doing some trade there as well,
Yeah.
and on to Cramlington.
Yeah.
But yeah, she would go up there and have
And it would be the old Cramlington.
yes, it
Yeah,
would.
just
Yeah.
in the back of,
So the High Pit area in the
Yeah.
old Cramlington village.
yeah, yeah.
That's probably where she went. This is my nana. This is her in much later life. I haven't got a date.
Oh, well, that's lovely.
Obviously that's the way she was dressed all the time in the fisher clothes. But this is her a little bit earlier on. I think she was dead by the time I was born in 1953. So again, I don't know when that was.
Mhm.
But that's on what slope at Whitley Bay, and she was selling her wares there.
Excellent.
You know,
Yeah.
paraphernalia.
So hard-working.
It was very hard work.
But we spoke
but-
about how people had a pitch, so maybe we need to try to establish that, because we've heard from other people that they've gone all over. They've gone to Jesmond, they've gone to Hexham, they've gone to
Yes.
Stockton on the train.
Yes.
So we kind of discussed before that maybe they had a pitch that had a stick to.
I would say so.
So you're saying that your grandmother
Yeah.
went to Cramlington
Yes.
every day.
Yes.
So that was her pitch.
That's right. I think they must have had an agreement, because if they all just went off their own way,
Yeah.
it might end up that there was 3 of them in one particular place.
Yeah.
So it would have been a wasted journey,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't have sold as much.
Yeah.
So I think they must have had some agreement amongst themselves of exactly where they were going to go. Yeah.
What about your granddad?
My granddad, he wasn't a fisher.
Was he not?
He was from a fishing family.
Right.
He was John Smith. All of his family were fisher folk,
Right.
but John wasn't the fisherman. He was a labourer. So unfortunately, I've got no photographs of him. They were both dead when I was born. They were both at 12 Front Street when each of them
What
died.
ages did that happen for them? Were they fairly youngish?
Um,
By today's standard?
Yeah, they would have been youngish. I don't know, because I say with my nana had my mum obviously late on in life, so she wasn't extremely young.
Yeah.
But some of the local Taylor family have passed on different memories. And my grandfather apparently used to keep canaries in the backyard at 12 Front Street. So really I haven't got an awful lot I can tell you about him, but they were from a fishing family. The only thing I can say is that John's father, he is actually on his John and Annie's wedding certificate. He was a diver, and he helped build Tynemouth Pier. Yeah, and I think in them days they had to wear the heavy brass or whatever it was, the heavy suits and the boots. And I know my mother's often said it must have been horrendous having to dive down into the very deep waters. But again, he was a fisherman as well, and they were all lifeboat crew. My grandfather, Francis, that's him when he was younger with the cork vest on, and that's him in much later life. He was actually...
Frank Taylor.
That's Frank Taylor. He was born in 1849 and he died aged 87 in 1936. But he got a lovely send-off, the veteran's death when he died. Yeah. So that's him there. When he died. And then we've got a Cullercoats veteran's death, which was taken out of the newspaper. Which just explains that he began work at the age of 12 as a deep sea fisherman. Among his many narrow escapes, there was an occasion when his couple was run down by a steamer Titania off Marden Rocks. His younger brother was drowned, and Frank and his father were picked up by a boat from the Titania, and they had managed to cling to the bottom of the Coble. And he was a member of the lifeboat crew, which in 1915 rescued crews of Cullercoats Cobles wrecked in a storm off Newbiggin, in which 7 Newbiggin fishermen lost their lives. But yeah, he was 52 years service for the lifeboat.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about him, and that's a different photograph of him again, just, you know, I'm lucky that I've got these sort of having
Yeah,
the
lovely.
photographs because they mean more to you, don't they?
Yeah.
So he was quite a prominent figure, I believe, as all the tailors
Yeah.
and Bruntons and stories, you know, they're all,
Amazing.
yeah.
And so who have we got here in this picture?
Well, this is Joe Robinson. Now, Joe Robinson was my nana's grandfather.
Right.
When my nana married John Smith, her father was Frank Taylor. Frank Taylor married Margaret Robinson, who was the daughter of Joseph. So Joseph is very, very famous for the hurling stick.
Right.
He would go out again like a lifeboat man, and he would go out with the lifeboat crew, and if they needed to throw the hurling stick to the ship that was in distress, he would do that, and he would rescue people, bring them back. What the crew did was they would get him into a stable position, either on the rocks or on the lifeboat itself. He would hurl the stick, which I think about 120 metres or something it goes, maybe further. He would throw the hurling stick. He was the best one at doing that, apparently. And the guys on the lifeboats, the rest of the crew, would have a very heavy belt, rope tied to his belt, and they would all hang on to him via the rope and the belt while he threw it, and then that's how the rescue was usually made. I've also got another photograph here which shows better indication of, this is quite famous. I think that one was done by Winslow Homer. He was well known for being painted in Cullercoats, but this is him as well. And this is just showing how he would rescue. This is a young lady with a child, and he's heaving them back to safety there. So yeah, very famous man. He was actually, and I have had this verified by some of the past tailors and Cullercoats, he was actually on Skipper Sardines many years ago when I was a child. My mother used to get the Skipper Sardines, and she used to say, "That's your gaffy." She used to say, "Gaffy Joe." Yes, I think a lot of the Cullercoats families had tried to sort of say, well, we should be getting some money for his picture being used.
Oh, yes.
This one was painted by J.D. Watson, that other one was by Homer. But they didn't get the rights to use it, I believe, and the family knew that they could, but there were so many of them all, the family tree was so big, they said by the time they got a payout, it would be a pittance per person. So, they were able, Skipper, John West, whoever they were then, they were able to use the picture and nobody objected. But it was nice that it was used.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
nice,
definitely.
So he's very, very prominent, very important man to me. The Robinsons, I don't really know much about them. Yes, he did have children. I know he was married twice, and did have quite a few children. But my nana, no, because that was Frank Taylor. Sorry. Yeah, basically, I don't know anything about the Robinsons.
Okay.
I've done a lot of genealogy, but I didn't look too much into his. Yeah. I've got a little something here to show you, going back to Anne, my grandmother. Obviously, they wore the ordinary fisherwoman's clothes, as you know.
Yes.
You know that something that they could do all the work in. But this is actually my nana's shawl. That was passed down to me from her to my mother and then to me. And when they were going to like a harbour day like we had the other day, or a fisherman's mission do, or anything of any importance, this is what she would wear. But this is all made by her.
Oh, she made this.
She made this, yeah. So it's all, you can see on the back, it's very well done, but you can tell that it is homemade because there's a few slight errors there, but that's good. But yeah, so this is what they would wear when they
So
would
how old is this now?
Oh gosh, I'm guessing maybe 1920s. Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, she put all these tassels on. The material would have possibly come back from, maybe she made it a bit later, because I try and put it together. One of my elder uncles he was a submariner, and during the war, the Second World War, he was away in the Far East, on the submarines, and he came back with a lot of Oriental stuff.
Yeah.
And we think that's where this black silky material came from.
Like that.
Yeah, Hong Kong,
Hong
China,
Kong,
all that sort of thing. And this was all added. She added all this tassel stuff herself, and she decorated it all herself. I mean, there would have probably been other women in the family, our daughters might have all helped her. I don't
You
know.
get a feeling when you're holding this, because she's actually sat
and
made that and crocheted or
exactly. Yeah. It's a lovely thing, and the thing is, it's just been. My mother gave it to me when I got married, so it's been just lying in a box wrapped up in, decent tissue paper to protect it. But this is why I've donated it to the watch house, and I've said for them to do whatever they want to do with it. They can use it. It's such a shame for it to be put away, but to me, it's come home.
Yes.
But that's where it belongs. It has,
back to
because presumably she wouldn't have been one of the fisher wives standing in the watch house looking out in anything like this. She would have had a proper fisher wives dress on. But I still feel that 12 Front Street's 50 yards from the watch house would have been. And when I said I wanted the watch house to have it, I said it's come home. It's where she would want it to be. So it's lovely, and it's lovely that it's been given to such a good project for other people to see, rather than to be in my wardrobe, So that's the fisherman's the fisher clothes fancy shawl. Yes. I've got a couple of other old things here, going back again to my mother. I'm going back and forward here. The little ladyship book, this has got on, it was given to Miss Mona Smith. It was awarded by a Miss Hall on July the 16th, 1929.
That's your nana,
that's my mam.
Your mam?
That's my mam, Mona, again, passed down. And this one, I think she got from John Street School as well, to Miss Mona Smith of 12 Front Street. 2 old books. So that's what with those and the shawl, it makes you have that closeness to them and want to find out what you can.
Because they hold all those memories.
Yes.
I believe that they do.
Yeah, definitely.
The from them
You say when you're picking through books like this, you know that how many have handled it. She's read it, but probably all her sisters, her brothers maybe. So it is nice. Yes. Yeah.
So, can you remember your time in Cullercoats?
Well, I was about 5 when Front Street was pulled down. Got all maps and things here of Brown's Buildings, Nancy's Yard, and places that are just no longer there. Anyway, sorry, this is an old photograph or picture of Front Street. So 12 Front Street's down here, and this is the cottages. And then this is a more recent one. You can see it's all boarded up, ready to be demolished. Again, I haven't got the date, but I would think that must be about 1958.
Right, okay.
Because I was about 5, but it was, and it was Archibald's shop that was on the corner.
Right.
My mum lived in number 12, but it was when I used to go. As I say, I was only about 5, but very dingy, dark accommodation. Obviously, it was rented, and most of the family actually lived in. As they got married and they brought up the children, the family increased. It had 4 floors, I believe, if I remember rightly. And when I walked in, it was all brown, sort of varnishy type of paint, the sort of thing that you would get in those days. So you would turn left to go to the front room where my 2 aunties lived. One was a spinster, one was a widower. And all I can remember is that was their room. It was quite a large room. It had a big square dining table in. that had one of those green baize cloths. And these are the things that are so vivid in my memory. And they had a double bed in there,
Yeah.
and it had a big padded golden coloured counterpane, you know,
Yeah.
the really old fashioned.
Yeah.
It had one of those on the top, and it had an open fire and a couple of armchairs, and that was where they lived. You went down the very dark passageway into another room where there was somebody else lived in there. It might have been Auntie Betty in later life. That was with my mum on JP's beach there. And then went through into the scullery and then out into the backyard where I believe there was an air raid shelter, if I remember rightly. There was just a basic sink in there. The toilet was in the backyard. And then you had another 2 flights at least going up. But right in the top in the attic, there was an old gas mask that had been, there was stuff up there from the wall that had just been pushed up there. And I can remember going up there with a couple of my cousins, and we used to think it was great going up where there was some secret things. But I remember this gas mask very plainly, and we used to put it on our faces, and it stunk. It had this horrendous smell. But they're really the only memories I've got. I know they had put in later years of them being there, probably during the war, just before the war, they had put a sink, just a basic sink, on the landing, and they had some sort of cooking facilities to save them coming down and all sharing the kitchen. But at one time, that's what they would have all done. So that's really all I can remember. But it was a terrible build. It was damp.
Was it rented?
It was rented. Yeah. And I think I remember Mum saying, like most of the fishing community, they had no money. Yeah. They were all living hand to mouth. It was really, in some ways, poverty stricken. But they always had a meal on the table. My mum used to say it didn't matter who came. My mother always got something out. My nana always got something out to feed them. So there was just always an open door. The kettle would be put on, or there would be, food getting put out. But they wouldn't have Sunday roast dinners. They would have salmon, because salmon was so easy to get and so cheap. Yeah. You look at salmon now; it's as expensive as a joint, isn't it? So little things like that I remember telling me all about. The hardship, but they all just got on with it. And if one didn't have something, somebody else would give them it or would share. I think that's just the way the community was. Yeah. We're very tight. Were you there long? Did you stay in Cullercoats? When I went, I didn't actually live there. No, well, what happened was, when it was being decided that it was no longer really rentable, I was born in 1953, and were then shipping some of the families out. Yeah. So my 2 aunties that lived in the downstairs front room, they were the last 2 to leave. So my mum and dad and my brother, who was 10 when I was born, they moved out of Front Street and they were given a council house on the estate, Seatonville Road estate. And of course the difference in that, because it was a 3-bedroomed council house, it had a bathroom upstairs that never had, it had a toilet downstairs, and it had a lovely big back garden. So it must have been like a palace. The day my mother moved in there, we just say it must have been like a palace. So the rest of the family, my Auntie Betty and her family, they went to live on Marden Estate, pretty much the same time. So all of the families were moving out gradually as the council were rehousing them. And I think a lot of the really bad, dilapidated buildings from Cullercoats, that is where the families were. They were either on Marden Estate. I think they did get a choice, or they came up to Monkseaton. So what happened to your 2 aunties? My 2 aunties went to live on Ennerdale Road in Marden Estate. Yeah, again, they had a lovely house, but they were much older. And I think my mum did say it took a lot of getting used to. They still had a potty under the bed, although the bed was upstairs and they had the bathroom up there. They were so used to using a potty for years. That was what they did.
was their routine.
Yeah, it was just such a big difference for them, yeah. And then, of course, it was all pulled down. So that's a shame. I try and look now at exactly where it would have been. And I think I'm right, it's more or less where the boats are and beside the pub, the Queen's Head, sort of where they've got all the seats.
Yeah, yeah.
It would have been there.
But
But Archibald was on the end there, I was showing you before. My memories of that was a very dark, dingy, old-fashioned shop. But the people that had it were lovely. Some of the family didn't like to go in there because of it being a bit dark and dingy. And I think they used to think, oh, you know, what's going on in there? But the lady was so nice that I didn't mind going. I used to pop a lot, you know, I would say,
was that their name?
Archibald, yeah. Go along and get yourself a couple of a little bag of sweets on. I'll tell you what I used to get there, licorice root.
Oh yes.
Go along and get yourself a licorice root. I know they probably thought, well, that's going to keep her quiet for quite a while, sucking that. But so I didn't mind going in, but it was a very, very. But again, it's what you would expect.
Yes. Yeah.
And my dad, he wasn't from Cullercoats. He was Whitney Bay. But he used to work in the butchers in Cullercoats. That was, I don't know the owner of it, but it was run by John Wilson. There's quite a bit written about him in the butchers as well. So my dad, before the war, he worked in the butchers in Cullercoats. I think it was down one of the side streets between a couple of the pubs, which are not there. I never knew exactly where that was.
There was a pub called the Newcastle.
Yes, I think there was a little lane beside that, and you went down that lane and you came to this. I'm sure there'll be people who will remember it. But,
I think someone else mentioned it.
Yeah. And the other one is the Fisherman, which I've got a photograph of. On here, that is my nana, very, very young, and her sister, Kitty, and they're both standing outside. Now, there was a fishmonger, I believe, across the road from Front Street, but my cousin thinks that this is actually at the bottom of Whitley Road. So I don't know, I need somebody to verify that, but they're both standing there. Obviously, my nana's the elder at this end. Yeah, so that was there as well, but that's really all I can remember. Just the old-fashioned house, and yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed that.
Absolutely fascinating. And I feel as if I've been on this journey with you this
morning. Oh, that's
so
good. That's
thank you
good.
very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I shook her down, heave away, haul away. I shook her all about the town. We're bound for South Australia.